Hey everyone, welcome to the final episode of Intoxicating Privilege. This is number 7, and I'm going to talk about classism in this episode. And I really think this kind of almost wraps up the series in a pretty complete way because I think class and um, the level of money that somebody has grown up with or experienced can really influence how we think about the world and how we think about other people. And it really connects the threads of all the different layers of identity that I've been talking about in this series, in that race, gender, um, physical ability, body size, all of those identities can really be influenced by money. And by the amount of money that somebody has in our society, and how somebody can be seen in a certain way um, based on the amount of money they have or don't have, and whatever that may look like. And let me give you an example of what I'm thinking about and how these threads tie together. When I did the very first episode on race and talking about the racist thoughts that I had about a woman who was working at a copy center, which we would consider in our society a working class job, probably making minimum wage or maybe a little bit above, but certainly not a corporate job, certainly not one that we would think of that's in the higher income levels. And so when I put out that video, I talked a little bit while later after that video with a good friend of mine who's an African American woman who works for a corporate job and makes a very good, nice living. And when she told me that she saw that video, her first thought was, is that what he thinks of me? Does he think all these terrible things about me as a black woman? And when we had that conversation, I said, you know what? Those thoughts never even entered my mind, because I think of class was the main factor that automatically put her into a different category, if you will, in my mind, if I had to go back and think about it, of she's in a corporate job, she's a highly educated person, and so that overlap, that interlacing of class and race came together in a different place in my mind when I met her as a corporate worker, right, as somebody who's in a corporate job, versus somebody who's at a lower level job and is also a black woman, right? So all of those societal concepts and ideas and constructs of race and class blended together in my brain when I saw the woman working at the copy center. That is a really important aspect of what we're talking about when we talk about privilege. So it's not just about my white skin, but it's also about the way that I grew up and the amount of money that I was around when I grew up. Now, when I grew up in a what was in the 90s considered middle class, maybe a little bit higher to the upper income, and I was living in an environment in a neighborhood that was very much upper income, gated neighborhoods, people living in multi-million-dollar homes. There was a professional golf course down the street for me that was a gated community. I was growing up and being around people who had a lot more money than me and a lot more money than our family, but I still lived a very comfortable life. I had everything that I ever could want as a kid. I didn't struggle for anything to do with money, what I needed. My basic needs were well beyond met. So I didn't have any of those struggles and didn't experience any of those things as a kid. But I later, as I went into college and got older and went into downtown Seattle and went to University of Washington, I saw people living on the street. I saw people struggling with not having enough money. I saw plenty of people of color not being able to get the same kind of opportunities as white people. And so my worldview was changed through those experiences, and then it was changed even more as I got into social work and I started getting to know and working within communities and understanding the reason why poverty exists and the reason why it extends beyond just little small pockets. It is generational, and it is vast, and it has gotten bigger as the decades have gone on, and the wealth and poverty gap has completely exploded. So when we think about classism, when we think about the way that our society is structured, it is tiered. It is low, middle, high. And depending on where you reside in that structure, that is going to factor into how you consider yourself in this world, what you think of other people. And I think it's really important that no matter what other identities you hold, if you're somebody who has never talked to, never interacted with, never gotten to know anyone who's living in a different tier of class than you, that you're not going to understand the kind of privilege that you have potentially if you're not interacting with those people on a regular basis and on a human basis and on a relationship level. And that's how classism can get so dark and nasty and discriminatory and dangerous if people do not interact with each other and do not get to understand each other's stories. And I think that actually also applies to people who are in the upper income. I think it's really easy to demonize people who have a lot of money and assume that people who have a lot of money are just soulless, terrible, awful people and they don't care about anyone else but themselves. That may be true of some people that have money, but that isn't true of all people that have money. Just like it's not true of all people who don't have money and are living paycheck to paycheck like myself. People in those environments and in those situations also, we can't assume that all of them, like our societal images would tell us, are lazy, don't care, don't want to work, don't have any interest, aren't smart. Right? There's all these assumptions that are made of groups of people based on how much money they have or don't have, and all of it's dangerous. And so this idea of classism is really upholding all of these supposed rules that if we can break them down, if we can look at them for what they really are and that they are just concepts, they are just ideas, and we get back to the root of who we are as people and as humans. I know that sounds very utopian and like I'm just some Pollyanna type thinker, but at the end of the day, if we as people who hold a lot of privilege, white people, people with money, people with upper education, if you're straight, if you're cisgender, I mean, all these layers that I've been talking about in this series, if you hold all those layers of privilege, it's your burden. It's your burden to carry, to understand what those all mean and why you have them and how you can share them, how you can use them, how you can let go of the guilt around them and look at how you can actually use them for good. That's what should be happening with privilege, and that's what my message is through this series, is to don't feel bad about your privilege, but use it instead for good and recognize how it's impacting you and how it's impacting others. And if you can do that, then you can stop this intoxication cycle and stop the cycle of trying to grab and reach for more and more privilege or hold on to more and more privilege wherever you can, because you can let some of it go and it's going to replenish itself. And if you already hold enough societal privilege where our society is made for you and by you, it's going to come back. It's going to be replenished. And so why not use some of it? Why not put yourself out on the line? Get to know people from sectors of society that you don't necessarily involve in yourself in all the time, and be proactive. And that's my message in this series. So there may be a second volume coming. Watch out for that one. And in the meantime, take care of each other.